A cold morning grips Fairbairn Airport. The sky is low and gray, a thin drizzle blurring distant hills.
Fuselage and windows are clear.
Runways glisten under the muted light, reflecting
Confirmed.
the steady
Moving
hum
engine
of pre-flight activity.
Altimeter check.
On the
Set to
tarmac,
30.
a McDonnell Douglas
Cross check
DC-9 sits
Roger.
quietly,
Systems green.
its metal skin slick with rain. Engines silent yet filled with latent power. Inside the cockpit, the crew moves with precision. Checklist routines are performed in calm, measured tones. Instruments scanned, altimeters set. Outside, ground crews finish the last pre-flight inspections, signaling through hand gestures against the wind. Passengers board in orderly fashion, unaware of the complexity that awaits above the clouds. The approach to Fairbairn is challenging. Undulating terrain and unpredictable weather create a narrow margin for error. The DC-9 systems, reliable yet demanding, will soon be tested not by mechanical failure, but by the unforgiving precision required of its crew. The camera would sweep over the runway, capturing every detail. Windsock snapping in the breeze, puddles collecting along painted lines, airport lights reflecting in the wet concrete. A sense of impending tension builds, silent but palpable, as if the environment itself is holding its breath. A faint fog begins to drift across the airfield. From the cockpit window, the crew can see little beyond the first 100 meters. Every instrument, every gauge, every decision now matters more than ever. The DC-9 taxes, and the first vibrations of the engine signal the journey ahead, a journey that will demand perfection, focus, and unyielding attention to the variables in play. In this quiet, methodical world, the story of the 1982 Fairbairn DC-9 begins, a story of precision, environment, and human endurance, unfolding in the narrow margin between control and disaster. Fairbairn Airport, nestled at the edge of rolling hills, had long been considered a challenging destination for pilots. Its relatively short runways and surrounding terrain required precise approaches, particularly in poor weather. By 1982, the airport had seen steady traffic from both commercial and military operations, each landing demanding exacting attention to instrument approaches and terrain awareness. The airline operating the DC-9 had a reputation for rigorous schedules and efficiency. The McDonnell Douglas DC-9 itself was a workhorse of short to medium range routes, valued for its reliability and speed. With its rear-mounted engines and T-tail configuration, the aircraft was nimble yet sensitive during approach and landing, especially in low visibility conditions. Crews were trained extensively, yet the operational demands, multiple daily rotations, changing weather, and complex airspace, left little room for error. Whether that February morning was typical for Fairbairn, overcast skies, intermittent drizzle, and a ceiling low enough to require reliance on instrument procedures, the surrounding hills compounded the risk. Approach charts outlined a narrow corridor. A deviation of even a few hundred meters could bring an aircraft perilously close to terrain. These environmental constraints were not merely theoretical. They had shaped operational procedures and accident histories for decades. Aircrew composition reflected a balance of experience and junior oversight. The captain, seasoned with thousands of flight hours, had routinely flown into challenging airfields. The first officer brought recent training on the DC-9, but less exposure to Fairbairn's unique approach. Together, they represented a combination of skill and vulnerability, knowledge tempered by the ever-present human limits of attention, decision-making, and situational awareness. Historically, the early 1980s mark a period of aviation transition. Automation and cockpit instrumentation were improving safety margins, yet reliance on human interpretation remained critical. The DC-9 system provided information, not absolution. Pilots still had to translate instrument readings, environmental cues, and procedural requirements into timely actions. In this context, the 1982 flight to Fairbairn was not just a routine operation. It was a convergence of aircraft capability, human judgment, and environmental challenge. The stage was set. Every factor, aircraft, crew, weather, terrain, would intersect in a precise, unforgiving moment. The background laid the groundwork for understanding how a routine approach could escalate into catastrophe. The McDonnell Douglas DC-9 was a precise machine designed for efficiency and short to medium hull reliability. Its twin rear-mounted engines offered smooth thrust and quiet operation in the cabin, while the T-tail design improved stability at cruising speeds. Yet, these very features required exacting handling on approach. A high-nose attitude and low visibility could obscure the runway. Slow corrections risked overcompensation. Systems like the altimeter, attitude indicator, and radio navigation aids were dependable but demanded constant interpretation. Any lapse in attention could cascade into misjudgment. The cockpit crew represented a microcosm of experience and vulnerability. The captain, with thousands of flight hours, had encountered difficult approaches before. His expertise extended beyond manuals. It was a practiced intuition honed over years. The first officer, newer to Fairbairn, had mastered instrument procedures but had limited exposure to the airport's variable weather and challenging terrain. This combination created a subtle tension. Knowledge tempered by experience gaps, decisions balanced on situational awareness. Environmental factors amplified the challenge. Fairbairn's approach corridor threaded between hills and valleys, leaving little margin for error. February's weather brought low cloud ceilings and intermittent drizzle, reducing visibility and rendering visual cues unreliable. Wind shear, though mild, could subtly alter glide path angles. Even slight deviations in altitude or lateral alignment could place an aircraft dangerously close to terrain. The approach was not impossible. It demanded precision and careful adherence to instrument guidance. Aircraft systems, though modern for the era, provided data without judgment. The flight director, autopilot, and navigation radios could guide the aircraft along ideal paths, but only if correctly engaged and continuously monitored. Altimeter settings had to be precise. A single misreading could misrepresent altitude relative to terrain. The instruments were allies, yet required the crew to translate their information into timely, accurate control inputs. Taken together, these angles form a network of interdependence. Aircraft capabilities, crew experience, environmental hazards, and systems reliability. Each factor alone was manageable. Together, they created a delicate balance, one where minor miscalculations could ripple outward. The 1982 Fairbairn DC-9 flight approached the intersection of all these variables, a convergence that would test the boundaries of precision, judgment, and situational awareness. The DC-9 began its final approach under low cloud cover, instruments commanding every decision. The captain engaged the approach procedure, scanning altimeter, airspeed, and glide slope indicators with methodical precision. The first officer monitored navigation radios, calling out headings and distance markers. Outside the cockpit, the world was a gray blur. Visual references were fleeting, distorted by drizzle and mist. As the aircraft descended, subtle misalignments began to appear. A minor drift left of center was corrected with small rudder inputs. The glide slope fluctuated slightly, influenced by gusts along the hilly approach corridor. These were within operational tolerances, but in combination with low visibility, they required heightened attention. The cockpit remained calm. Routine calls exchanged. Instruments meticulously scanned. Approaching the minimum descent altitude, the margin for error narrowed dramatically. Terrain rose ahead, obscured by fog. The flight director indicated a slight deviation. Corrective inputs were applied, yet timing lagged by mere seconds. The DC-9 speed and weight meant that every adjustment took a moment to manifest. A series of small errors, minor lateral drift, slightly low altitude, delayed correction, compounded. At this critical juncture, the aircraft was still fully controllable. No systems failed. No extraordinary maneuvering occurred. What unfolded was a textbook case of controlled flight into terrain, CFIT conditions. An aircraft, fully functional, flown into an obstacle due to misjudgment and situational constraints. The combination of reduced visibility, complex terrain, and split focus created a narrow window where even experienced crews could falter. In the cockpit, the crew worked as trained, calling out altitudes, adjusting headings, cross-checking instruments. Outside, the environment offered no warning beyond subtle cues, mist drifting over ridges, shadows of hills softened by clouds. The accident sequence was measured in seconds, precise yet unavoidable once the convergence of factors reached its threshold. The DC-9 descended into the last 100 meters of approach. Every system operated normally. Every action by the crew reflected training and intent. Yet, the alignment between aircraft, crew, and terrain had reached a critical tipping point. The event itself was instantaneous from an external perspective, but the narrative of its causes, crew decisions, environmental limits, instrument interpretation, had been building over the entire approach. The immediate aftermath at Fairbairn Airport was a mixture of procedural response and operational shock. Emergency teams were activated, local authorities coordinated with airline operations, and investigators began securing data from flight recorders, crew interviews, and environmental analysis. The DC-9 had left a complex trail of evidence, yet no mechanical malfunction had precipitated the event. The investigation, led by the National Aviation Authority, focused on three principal areas: crew performance, environmental conditions, and procedural compliance. Flight data recorder analysis revealed that the aircraft's descent rate and airspeed remained within safe operating limits until the final seconds. Autopilot systems, navigation aids, and all flight controls were functioning correctly. This reinforced the conclusion that the crash resulted from loss of situational awareness amid challenging environmental conditions rather than equipment failure. Investigators examined the cockpit crew's interactions, training records, and decision-making processes. The captain's experience and the first officer's proficiency were both validated, yet subtle gaps in approach familiarity and cross-checking routines emerged. Fatigue and cognitive load during the approach were considered contributing factors. The low cloud ceiling and variable winds had reduced the margin for corrective action, leaving little room to recover from minor deviations. Environmental analysis highlighted the limitations imposed by Fairbairn's terrain and microclimate. Instrument approach procedures were scrutinized, and recommendations were made to enhance approach guidance, including more precise altitude callouts, terrain awareness briefings, and strict adherence to glide slope monitoring. These procedural updates were designed to prevent CFIT scenarios under similar weather and terrain conditions. The impact extended beyond regulatory reports. Airlines reviewed training programs, placing greater emphasis on situational awareness and decision-making under constrained conditions. Aircraft manufacturers revisited cockpit instrumentation design, improving readability and standardization. The 1982 Fairbairn DC-9 accident became a case study in controlled flight into terrain, emphasizing that even a fully functional aircraft and experienced crew can be vulnerable when environment, human factors, and operational complexity intersect. The investigation reinforced aviation's core lesson: safety is cumulative. Every procedure, every instrument reading, Every decision contributes to a chain that can prevent or inadvertently allow disaster. While the accident could not be undone, the analytical rigor applied in its aftermath has shaped training, approach protocols, and cockpit resource management for decades. The legacy of the 1982 Fairbairn DC-9 accident lies not in tragedy alone, but in the measured lessons it imparted to aviation. The flight, its crew, and the environment became a case study in the delicate balance between human judgment, aircraft capability, and environmental constraints. The loss, while devastating, prompted reflection, adaptation, and enduring procedural improvement. In the years following the investigation, airlines incorporated enhanced cockpit resource management (CRM) training, emphasizing communication, cross-checking, and decision-making under stress. Instrument approach procedures at Fairbairn and similar airfields were revised to reduce risk of controlled flight into terrain. The importance of strict adherence to minimum descent altitudes, continuous glide slope monitoring, and proactive situational awareness became central teaching points for pilots worldwide. Technological lessons were also integrated. Altitude awareness systems, improved navigation displays, and more intuitive instrumentation design emerged as direct responses to CFIT risks. Pilots were trained to interpret these tools not as infallible guides but as complementary to judgment and experience. The DC-9 itself, a reliable platform, continued in service, but with procedures informed by this accident to ensure that environment, equipment, and human factors operated in harmony. The accident's quiet, methodical narrative reinforces a broader truth. Aviation safety is incremental. Each event, each analysis, contributes to a cumulative body of knowledge. Mistakes, errors, and miscalculations are meticulously dissected, not to assign blame, but to prevent recurrence. The 1982 Fairbairn DC-9 stands as a reminder that even under controlled conditions, vigilance is paramount, and safety is the sum of countless small actions performed precisely and consistently. As the fog lifts over Fairbairn, the runway glistens in early morning light, empty yet prepared. Aircraft continue to taxi, approach, and depart, guided by lessons learned decades prior. The story of this flight closes not with spectacle, but with quiet reflection, an enduring testament to the relentless pursuit of safety, precision, and understanding in aviation.